In 2022, my friends and I started a band. So when the Scholastic News first started off, we were fortunate to have a great support system begin the journey with us. Parents turned to social media markers, friends turned to roadies, and because Alpena, Michigan, the town where we started, is so small, it was not challenging to find work. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 1 month and 8 shows with the Scholastic News, all the way from getting the gig to the performance and then some. Let's get into it. Connor and I started the band basically at the beginning of 2022. I made a video about the birth of the band, which you can find here. Once we were joined by Kyle and Cam, we had enough of an act to book some real performances. Our first step to booking gigs was to find the places in Alpena that had live music and make some good old-fashioned cold calls. In Alpena, there are essentially 4 main venues that have live music. There's the Palace, there's the Treehouse, there's the Big Bar, and there's Little Italy. Most of these places are located right in the downtown area, all within a few miles of each other. Additionally, there are lots of events put on, usually by a local arts council, and there's an organization that gets street performers together, which is actually how we got our second gig. In the spring, Connor and I visited the Big Bar and the Treehouse. The Big Bar was our first stop, and we immediately realized that they weren't really interested in us. One of the first things the owner made clear to us was that his business, as a pub, wasn't going to make money off of minors. That said, he didn't want us bringing in the riffraff, kids our age, into the bar after hours. That interaction brought Connor and I to the realization that some venues might straight up be off limits to us as minors. Fortunately, the owner of the Treehouse was very interested in us, and as soon as we walked in and talked to them, they immediately offered us a slot every Thursday once summer began. Connor and I were elated. I mean, to be honest, we didn't expect to get a gig, much less a gig that easily. However, that first visit to the Treehouse was where we made one of our first big mistakes. When they asked us how much we charge, we didn't have an answer. Now that we've had so much experience, it's hard to believe that we would walk in to book a gig without establishing a rate from the get-go, but we were new to the game. During that visit, we kind of shot ourselves in the foot, and it would come back to bite us later. In any case, we continued looking for the opportunity to play anywhere we could. We booked a gig at the Treehouse, we booked a gig with the street performers, and then, thanks to another family friend, we got ourselves a gig opening at the All-American Summer Blowout. Our first week of shows was booked, and it began in mid-June when school had let out and we were all ready to play. I'll probably talk about those 3 shows in another video, or not, but it was a great start. The first one at the Treehouse was just me, Cam, and Connor because we booked it before we had a bassist. We each got paid $20, it was sunny, it was fun, we attracted a great crowd, it was awesome. Our next show was outside, this time with Kyle, and it was windy. I mean, what more can you say? If it's windy, no one can hear you. Our third gig was at the Alpena Band Shell. We were mic'd, we were on stage, it was awesome, and no one was there. But it was a great opportunity. While our first few shows were modest, they were a great way of getting our name out there, and before long, people began to know the Scholastic News. Not the magazine. Us. Yeah, we talked about changing the name. We're probably going to have to at some point. Yeah. After that week, we committed to Thursdays at the Treehouse, and pretty soon other businesses were knocking at our door. That brings me to my next point, scheduling. As we started booking more gigs, it became harder to keep an organized group schedule. All 4 members have other jobs and plenty of extracurriculars. I mean, we're high schoolers. One thing we did make sure of right from the start was that we were all in on being a regular performing band. There was a little bit of anxiety early in the season that if we didn't keep getting work, we were going to stop rehearsing and the band would kind of fall apart. If there wasn't a steady flow of gigs, we might lose that ulterior motive for practicing, improving, learning. And this fear was not completely unfounded. However, thanks to the steady flow of Thursdays and the public approval and the other businesses knocking at our door, we were able to keep rehearsing at least once or twice a week. Of course, like I just said, it's understandable that a bar band can't be the full-time job for the guys in the band. We've got work, girlfriends, sailing, enough stuff to do that rehearsal and performance should not completely overtake all of it. Anyway, we got into a groove where we'd rehearse early in the week, perform later in the week, and rest on weekends. That brings me to my next point, rehearsal. While I did just say that it shouldn't absorb your whole life, rehearsal needs to happen, and it definitely needs to happen for our band. In rehearsals, not only do we improve on our set, but we expand it.
Okay, ready? We're gonna try that. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Here's a typical rehearsal. I mean, we'll walk in, maybe discuss our last show or future shows. We'll get something going, maybe a new thing Connor's learned or written. Maybe Cam will show off his polyrhythms. Maybe we'll learn a new crowd pleaser. Or discuss what music to learn next. If it feels like an off day or Kyle's missing or something, we might even switch instruments. Our shows are fast-paced. When you're up there, you're focused on nailing your part, keeping the crowd engaged. You're sweating, you're analyzing, you're trying to get dialed in. It's like a competitive sport, at least for me. Rehearsal is a great time to cut out the noise of the crowd and focus on technique, growth, and understanding better the other members of your band. Plus, rehearsal is always very fun. I mean, it's music, come on. So now, you're with the Scholastic News and you've booked the gigs, you've organized the schedule, you're ready to perform. Let's get into game day. First thing about game day, get together and practice hours before performance time. That's one thing we always do, is try to get together a couple hours before we go on. Usually we try to run through the whole set just to make sure we remember the nuances of each song, and we also take that time to establish goals for the band, talk about how the evening's gonna go, that sort of thing. Second thing about game day, kind of counterintuitive to the last one, don't over-practice. Save the energy for the gig. You can run through the songs, but don't act like you're trying to please the crowd, especially if you're playing to a garage. Hell, you don't even have to play this whole song, just get through it, make sure you know it. Pace yourself. Playing for hours and hours can be exhausting, and again, with a fast-paced show, you don't want to over-practice, especially if you play an exerting instrument like kit or saxophone. And the third thing about game day, eat. We started making it a habit to eat before the show. If we got to the venue and unpacked on time, we'd be able to run to McDonald's or the food trucks downtown. Not only was this like a healthy, allotted amount of time to eat, but it was great bonding time for the band. And it's good for us. It sounds cheesy, but it's really important. Fourth thing about game day, give yourself time to pack. Most of us have a relatively small amount of gear. I mean, I got one case, Kyle's got his guitar and his amp, Cam's got his kit, but he's become kind of an expert at breaking it down and tossing it in the back of his Jeep in no time. Connor, however, controls all the gear for the keys and the guitar, which includes all the wires, all the pedals, and more. And he's very particular about it. So typically we break down about 2-ish hours between rehearsal and performance time. That way we'll have time to pack everything out of the garage, bring it over to the venue, unpack it at the venue, and maybe have some time to eat. So now, back to the day with the Scholastic News. Everything's in the van, you've rehearsed, you've eaten, you're ready to perform. And I'm realizing that this is a really long video already, so stay tuned for part 2 when we get into performance time.